Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez has announced the closure of a prison in the capital Caracas, where torture and other human rights abuses were documented by independent organisations. Ms. Rodriguez made the announcement alongside an amnesty bill that could lead to the release of hundreds of prisoners, including opposition leaders, journalists and human rights activists detained for political reasons. They're the latest concessions made since taking power after the US seizure of Venezuela's then President Nicolas Maduro in a military attack last month.
We're now joined by Venezuelan studies expert from Trobe University, Associate Professor Raul Sanchez Urribarri. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this morning. Perhaps if we could start by outlining us what could possibly be behind the purpose of proposing this amnesty law.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity once again to talk about Venezuela. As we know, the situation in Venezuela has been changing very quickly, swift, on the ground. Decision to this amnesty law that's being proposed, along with a reform to the justice sector, are part of the last moves of the sitting interim government of Delcy Rodriguez. On one hand, of what it seems to be an ongoing arrangement with the United States, and particularly, of course, with the Trump administration, to act in certain ways and take certain decisions in exchange from concessions on agreements from the part of the Trump administration as well. For example, in this case, it's not a coincidence that we see a lift on the sanctions, further arrangements and prospective investments on the oil sector, and on the other hand, these moves that herald apparently greater liberalization within, and I have to emphasize, what is still an authoritarian regime.
Yeah, it's an interesting picture that's coming out of Venezuela at the moment, isn't it? But I want to quote here what Delcy Rodriguez had said about this law that she's proposing, this amnesty law. She says that this law will serve to heal the wounds left by political confrontation, fueled by violence and extremism. Those are her words, of course. We know that Venezuela's political structure is a hybrid of the authoritarian government, as you say, but also it includes guerrilla groups and criminal gangs as well. How much support do you think Rodriguez will get, with this particular law, this amnesty law?
I think in terms of the support, the nominal support of the parliament, the National Assembly, as we call it according to the Venezuelan Constitution, we can pretty much take it for granted in the sense that she has a majority there, an overwhelming majority of the parliament. Is presided by her brother, Jorge Rodriguez. And in that sense, we can count that will be approved. However, you're pointing to an interesting question, because beyond the institutional control of the parliament lies, of course, a political coalition that is being pummeled with what's happened in the last month. Chavismo, of course, is still recovering politically from what happened, and there are different indicators that point to boiling discontent, at least in part of the rank and file and part of Chavismo. And this points to a need for Delcy Rodriguez that we commented on a previous interview, that now she's in that position. If she's going to be working with the Trump administration, well, at the same time, she's eventually going to find resistance from those who were told for 25 years that the U.S. was the great hegemon that needed to be fought against.
Yeah, it's intriguing, isn't it? Because with the release of political prisoners and you would presume then that pro-democracy groups would become more prominent then, and they would demand more democracy from this, as you say, still an authoritarian regime. How would that then sit with those who benefited from the Chavez and Maduro governments?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I've been following, in these kind of situations, you want to follow, of course, the news and pundits and what people here and there are saying, but also comments on the ground, on Facebook, on social media. And you can see there how people, for example, some Chavista supporters are already reacting against this measure. On the other hand, on the side of the opposition, of course, and I would like to say, perhaps, I'm pretty sure the wide majority of the country receive this news with a major sense of relief, in the sense that, well, looking at, of course, at the liberation of political prisoners and the prospects of of having a measure that allows for moving forward after what's been years of repression and so forth can also be welcome. But I want to say it's welcome, but not without wariness, because again, this is a decision made by an authoritarian government that is not trusted. It's not trusted by the opposition. It's also not trusted by part of the of Chavismo itself.
Yeah, you say wariness there. I'm presuming that's how neighboring Latin American countries are also viewing what's going on in Venezuela.
Absolutely. I mean, and Venezuela, of course, is a bedazzling case. Again, it's become a bit of an uncomfortable question right now for the rest of the region. Now that some time has passed from the incidents of early January and the U.S. attack in Caracas and Maduro's capture, because on one hand you have the governments on the right wing side of the spectrum, which weren't critical of the U.S. Moves, of course, want to see those decisions and the Venezuelan project, so to speak, work out. But on the other hand, it's in the hands again of Chavismo, of Delcy Rodriguez. This is not an opposition figure. And then on the other hand, you have on the left side, well, they're very critical of what happened, but now they are seeing with dismay that the same ally, who is still a political ally, Delcy Rodriguez and Chavismo, are deciding quickly to open their arms to the oil industry, kind of backtrack on steps that have been made to nationalize the oil industry all the way back to the mid-70s when the government was a liberal democracy. Yeah. I mean, this is, of course, quite shocking for, some left-wing movements and allies in the region. Yeah. So Venezuela has become a real pressing question for these governments.